Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey.
Okay.
Hey.
So then you have number 2.
The history of graffiti was often viewed as negative and often considered a crime. What do you believe caused the shift from crime to art? How do you think it plays a big part in racial injustice? I get an answer?
Yeah, give your thoughts.
Yeah, you can give your thoughts on what you think.
Graffiti is cool and is also a way to express yourself. If you like something like Black Lives Matter, and if you support it, you can draw it on a wall. But it's also illegal, but it also helps support at the same time too. So
thank you.
I think one of the things that we want to ask ourselves, like, why is graffiti illegal, right? You know, why in a country where our First Amendment is the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, have we made this particular art form illegal? And think about how many art forms are actually illegal in this country. And there aren't a lot, right? So what is it about this particular art form where people do not need to be part of the establishment in order to practice this art, right? All you need is some paint and some space. And you can put your message up anywhere you want to. All of a sudden, this becomes illegal. In the neighborhoods that I grew up when I was on the West Side, the graffiti was vast, right? And it covered a lot of different things. A lot of the graffiti that I saw growing up was used to signify certain territories for some of the gangs that were in the neighborhood that I grew up in. While other graffiti was used to like give these messages about love and relationships, you know, like the standard, like, you know, I love this girl, or, you know, have a heart with the names in it, all the way up to just these beautiful works of art. And I remember one of my favorite parts about taking the Eisenhower Expressway is that once you got near the Austin exit, there was this part where the subway was, and there's this long concrete wall. And the artist would just go down there and just tag that wall up. And that wall was forever filled with this really beautiful artwork, this really expressive way of writing, right? And so for so long, this art form has been done by Black and brown people in most urban cities. It is perhaps one of the highest form of urban art. It is one of the most expressive forms of art. It's one of the most diverse forms of art. Yet because Black and brown people practice it, it's also one of the most illegal forms of art. And again, the question you have to ask yourself is, why is it illegal, and what do they not want us to say? When you go up and take a billboard that somebody's paid, you know, thousands of dollars, you know, to go ahead and do a commercial for cell phone service or cigarettes, right? And then you go ahead, you hijack that billboard, and you go ahead and you put your own message up there to say what you want to say. Well, what kind of power is that? You know, you can go ahead and do that over the Dan Ryan Expressway. People are driving past and they're seeing your tag up there. What kind of power is that? What kind of statement is that, right? And so it's really important that we defend our ability to do public art, and that we also sort of challenge those laws that make that kind of public art illegal. Right?
Yeah, I think, you know, I grew up in the 80s too. I still remember the 70s a little bit. You know, there was, you know, a lot of the story was between rival gangs in Chicago and on the East and West Coast, and the overlap. I didn't understand it all at the time, but just colors, you know. And, you know, but the history of graffiti, it goes thousands of years back. I mean, it's a tool of war propaganda. The bottom line is it's about sending a message of rebellion. I think hip hop changed America's view of graffiti. It didn't happen overnight, but I think that the beauty of it came through movies like Beat Street and what's the other one? Crush Groove. I'll remember that, right? and you know, if you watch those movies, man, you get a sense of like hip hop becoming its own unique culture and woven into, you know, it began to get the same respect that jazz had in the, you know, back in that time period. So yeah, I think hip hop had a lot to do with that. And one little thing that popped in my head right away is that it's the language of rebellion and war, and we're at war. And we need to be strong in our message and clear in our message. I think one of the dangers right now is that the message gets too convoluted and confused. We need to be a united front as people of color. And that means not just Black, but Latino and you know, the entire, you know, a lot of this started with immigration. And so we have to backtrack and say, hey, wait a minute, this is a new kind of battlefront. And we need to find our new allies and the people who don't want to be on the side of those who are against equality.
I'm going to go back to some of this. What was the shift that made it art instead of crime? I don't think that, first of all, graffiti has always been art, but you know, defining art is how do you define art to the, you know, to an individual, right? One person's art, if they don't like it, then it might not be art to them, right? So I don't know if that's really the approach to take when thinking about graffiti. One of the things I think about is how, you know, trains in New York were made graffiti proof. Right, that's why graffiti artists couldn't had to stop painting on trains, because they were graffiti proof. You could just spray the paint off. But nowadays, like when I go to New York, I see corporations with their signs all over trains. Right, they're like corporations are selling all kinds of stuff, cell phones and whatever book is out, whatever, you know, TV show is out, and these are places that before artists would you know, paint their name and have social messages, and the goal for many artists was to go all city, which means to be popular, you know, in all 5 boroughs, right? So the message is always about resistance. When you know, when art and resistance becomes a crime is when corporations cannot capitalize on it, right? That's one way of looking at it, thinking about that. The other question, the other part is, how do you think it plays a part in racial justice? All of our messages in many ways is connected in some particular form to either racial justice or the lack of racial justice, right? So many of the Black Power advocacy groups of the 60s and 70s became gangs later on, and the drug in the days, well, in the drug epidemic like crack and heroin and things like that. But the lack of justice is why many of the quote gangs formed in particular ways, right? So the way that we look at it and think about it is we really have to connect to the history of a thing and see what that is really doing for a people. And graffiti in this particular way, when we like it's already been said, when we look at the history of graffiti, we can see what we were trying to accomplish with it. And then we can also see the pushback from that. The other things is now galleries showcase for, you know, graffiti artists and sell their work for multiple millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Graffiti is not a crime when corporations and galleries and et cetera can make millions of dollars off of this, you know, mostly Black and brown art form.
And it left the hood and went to the suburbs. So that's, you know, that's what happens. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why I was getting with that question. It's like before it was considered vandalism and a crime, but now it's, when I say it's more art, it's like more accepted in certain areas. And I know you mentioned New York already. I went to New York, and was driving on the bridge, and the whole rooftops of several brownstones lined up was full of graffiti, like lined up, and it looked amazing. I was like, that is amazing. I've never seen that like that before. The entire rooftop of the whole entire block was like covered in graffiti. So it's like, that's what I was trying to go. It's like, how did it become from vandalism into art? Like you said, now it's at galleries and things like that. And now people are starting to become more expressive with graffiti art, now that it's more acceptable and considered art as opposed to vandalism. And I think it also goes back to also the tone of how you put your message out that makes it negative, and then make you want to like people to cover it up. So I think the tone and the message of graffiti is where it crosses that line between vandalism and art. I don't know if that makes sense.
Incidentally, Tiffany, tattoos took the same trajectory. People, it used to be completely gang related if you saw somebody, or they were in some kind of biker thing or some, you know, and now it's like grandma has a tattoo. You know, and it's a statement. It's a personal statement, but it's provocative art. And I think it'd be cool to see a showcase of that talent, you know, and it's not just something taboo anymore, you know, that kind of thing. So
yeah.